Story 1. The Crawling Woman. The house I live in is only a few hundred meters away from a small, weathered church. Though I grew up as a Christian, my faith waned over the years. The church had become nothing more than a landmark, a familiar but inconsequential part of my daily commute. It was a shortcut for me, a path I took almost mindlessly on my way to catch the bus to work. It wasn't a place I associated with fear or dread. That was until one stormy night 3 months ago. The day had started uneventfully. I left home early for my shift as a line cook at the hotel. The skies were clear, and the air was crisp, giving no hint of the torrential rain to come. By the time my shift ended, I stepped out to streets drowned in floodwater. The rain had subsided briefly, but the damage was done. Traffic was at a standstill, and the buses were packed with exhausted commuters. I decided to get off a few stops early and walk the rest of the way, wading through ankle-deep water. When I reached the parking lot near the church, the gate was locked as usual. I climbed over it, just as I had countless times before. The lot was flooded, the water reaching my knees. The dim lights from distant houses provided the only visibility. Everything was silent, except for the relentless patter of rain. Then I heard a strange, faint splashing sound from the far corner of the lot. I stopped and squinted into the darkness. A figure was there, partially submerged in the water. As I got closer, I saw it was a woman. Her long, matted hair hung limply over her face. She was splashing and pounding the water with her fists, grunting with a raw, guttural noise. At first, I assumed she was having some kind of episode or was simply drunk. She wasn't close enough to be a threat, so I kept moving, glancing back occasionally. Then, just as I reached the dirt road that led home, I heard a splash behind me. I turned to see the woman lying face down in the water. My heart raced. Was she hurt? Drowning? I hesitated, guilt and dread twisting inside me. But before I could move, she began to rise. Her movements were wrong, jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. She crawled toward me on all fours, her limbs bending at impossible angles. Her head snapped up, and though I couldn't make out her face in the dark, I felt her gaze lock onto me. Pure, primal fear surged through me, freezing me in place for a moment before adrenaline took over. I ran. The sound of splashes followed me, her coarse breathing growing louder. Then came the scream, a sharp, piercing wail that sounded more animal than human. It cut through the rain, chilling me to the bone. I sprinted faster, tears streaming down my face as I begged my legs not to give out. When I finally reached my house, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I slammed the door shut behind me and collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. My brother found me there, sobbing and drenched. He tried to console me, but I couldn't speak. For days afterward, I was consumed by fear. Even now, I can't walk alone at night or endure the sound of rain without seeing her, crawling toward me, relentless and inhuman. Story 2. The Bell in the Forest. It was the summer after my first year of university, and I had returned to my quiet hometown. Our house sat on the edge of a dense forest, a place I had explored countless times as a child. The woods were a sanctuary for me, a place of adventure and solace. I thought I knew every trail, every stream, every hidden nook. But that summer, the forest showed me a darker side. One morning, I set out on a familiar path that led to a stream winding through the trees. The air was warm, the sun filtering through the canopy above. As I reached the water's edge, I heard it, a bell. The sound was faint but distinct, its deep, resonant tone cutting through the stillness. It wasn't the kind of bell an animal might wear. It was too heavy, too deliberate. I stood frozen, listening as the bell rang again, moving further north. My curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sound. After several minutes, the bell stopped. I shook off the unease and continued exploring, eventually coming across something that made my stomach turn: a decapitated badger. Its body lay sprawled near the stream, the wound fresh and crawling with flies. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had done this, someone with a knife, someone who had been here recently. I left the forest that day, but the unease lingered. A week later, I decided to return, this time in the evening. Rain began to fall as I made my way through the woods, the sun dipping below the horizon. The sound of the rain on the leaves was surreal, almost hypnotic. I hurried, hoping to reach the path before darkness fully set in. That's when I stumbled into it. The badger's body was hanging from a tree, its head tied to its paws with rough twine. The stench was overpowering, the sight grotesque. My stomach churned as I stepped back, gagging. My mind raced. Someone had placed it there after I passed through the forest the first time. Someone knew I would see it. And then I heard the bell again. It was closer this time, moving steadily toward me. I called my dad, my voice trembling as I begged him to meet me on the path. The rain drowned out most sounds, but I heard branches snapping and footsteps crunching through the undergrowth. My heart pounded as I glanced over my shoulder. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man, his face obscured by the rain and darkness. He held a bell, ringing it methodically as he moved toward me. His slow, deliberate pace was more terrifying than if he had been running. I turned and ran, my breath ragged, my legs burning. The bell's relentless tolling followed me, growing louder and louder. When I finally reached my dad, he heard it too. That sound, haunting, inescapable, has stayed with me ever since. I haven't set foot in those woods again. Story 3. The Man in the Abandoned Asylum. Exploring abandoned buildings was a pastime for me and my friends. We loved the thrill, the sense of danger, and the eerie beauty of forgotten places. But one trip changed everything. We decided to visit an abandoned mental asylum on the edge of town. The building was infamous, a decaying structure filled with rusted furniture, shattered glass, and whispers of its dark past. After hopping the fence, we made our way through the daycare area, finding old toys and crumbling furniture. That's when we heard it, a loud crash from the psych ward. My friend Brian, ever the bold one, insisted we investigate. Against my better judgment, we followed him, our flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. In one room, the stench of rotting meat hit us. A dead deer lay on the floor, its entrails spread in a grotesque display. Before we could process the horror, we heard whispering. Brian shone his flashlight into a corner, revealing a man. He stood hunched, muttering to himself. His clothes were filthy, and his hands twitched uncontrollably. Then he looked up. "You guys here for the feast?" he asked, his grin wide and unsettling. We bolted, slamming the heavy door shut behind us. Back in the daycare area, we heard tapping on the metal door. That's when we knew we had to leave. Later, we learned the man was a former patient who had escaped years ago, surviving in the woods. He was dangerous, but we were lucky to leave unharmed. That trip ended our urban exploration days for good. Story 4. The Stalker in the Woods. Late-night drives were a favorite pastime for me and my fiancée, Willa. One rainy November night, we found ourselves on a narrow gravel road in the middle of nowhere. The woods pressed close on either side, the darkness impenetrable beyond the reach of our headlights. Eventually, we stumbled upon a clearing with a dilapidated house. The sight was unnerving. Broken windows, overgrown weeds, and piles of junk littering the yard. Dozens of glowing eyes reflected our headlights. Cats, all staring at us silently. Then a rock smashed against our windshield. A man emerged from the bushes, holding a shovel. Moments later, the screen door of the house creaked open, revealing a spindly woman with long, wild gray hair. Her dark hands wiped on her skirt, leaving stains. Willa screamed, urging me to reverse. As we sped away, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. The old Chevy pickup from the house was following us, mimicking every turn we made. Finally, we reached a gas station. The truck passed us, but lingered at a distance before disappearing into the night. To this day, I wonder